Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And in this video what I want to do is revisit Vue. It's been a while since I've done a video on Vue. Since then, Vue 3 has been released. And Vue 3 comes up with some big changes. Not changes that you have to adopt. You can keep doing Vue the way you've been doing Vue. But some changes that some people may like, that might, especially if you're like a React developer and you're used to doing things in a sort of more functiony way. The new composition API kind of lets you do that. But if you enjoyed the old, like I don't know what they exactly call it, but the original Vue API where you have this big object and you just kind of break everything up into pieces, you can do that. Okay, so let's just kind of go over it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use Code Sandbox instead of spinning up a whole new Vue project. Or maybe I will. Let me think about that for a second. Nah. Okay, so I'm going to just do a Vue 3 template here in Code Sandbox. Okay, it's opening up a whole new one. Oh no, it's opening up the code I had before. That's fine. It's weird. Okie dokie. Let's just create a whole new sandbox. I want a fresh sandbox. Well, actually, let's just do this. I want to refresh the page. Okay, it's all sorts of confused. So I'm going to use VS Code. That's the thing with Code Sandbox lately. It's like sometimes it's just your best friend, and other days it's just not. Okay, so I'm going to open a new folder. And in videos, we'll call this Vue. And that works for me. Okay, so what I'm going to use is the Vite project generator because it's awesome. Okay, if you're not familiar with Vite, or Vite or whatever, it's like a new bundler. It takes advantage of ES modules and ES build, making it super fast. It's awesome. Okay, so essentially, I don't need to remember how to generate a like Vue or a Svelte or React project because I can always just do npm init Vite. That's it. That's all it takes. I just do that. Boom. It'll ask me a project name, so we're just gonna do like, testing out Vue 3 be the name of the project. Okay, it's gonna ask me what kind of project I want. One of these days I do really need to kind of do lit element and Preact. Like, why haven't I? Okay, so I'm going to do a Vue project. And it's gonna ask me, do I want it to do like just a normal Vue or Vue with TypeScript? I want a normal Vue project, and I have it. So now I can just cd into it. Let me just make sure it's Vue 3. Package Vue, yep, Vue 3, Vue 3. So that all looks good to me. Okay, so npm, or actually now I want to cd into testing with Vue 3. Do an npm install. Okie dokie. And ta-da! Okay, we got everything we need. So let me just spin up the server. So it should just be npm start, but let's just check. Scripts npm run dev is the command I want. Npm run dev. I can see that here. So that's that. Build to build. Serve is like if I want like to serve it. Okay, cool. So let's put that there. And then here we're gonna go to localhost. I wasn't paying attention to the number. Localhost 3000, of course. Okay, so there we go. We have our basic Vue 3 project with Vite. And if you've used React, you've used Svelte, you've used Angular, you guys kind of know the deal. You look in the source folder, there's some sort of main or index.js. This is the thing that mounts the app component to the DOM. Okay, and then that's pretty much it. So this is mounting it to the DOM. So it's mounting it here to the thing that has apps. So if I go to here, let's see where the index.js, here's the index.html. You can see there's a div with the ID of app. So this is mounting the app component to the element that has the ID of app. Simple as that. So essentially, just like React, the app component becomes sort of the center of the whole world. Okay, and basically, if you use Vue, if you've used Svelte before, this is going to be very familiar. But essentially what happens is that the whole component is in one file. So you can put all the CSS in the style tag. I'm going to get rid of the CSS for now. Okay, you put all your JavaScript in this script tag. I'm going to get rid of that for now. Okay. Start template is using Vue 3 experimental. That's kind of cool. I guess this is neat. I'm going to just kind of use the standard way of doing it for now. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then the template is where you would put like your HTML. So essentially, like, let's just build like a standard counter. Okay, so I'm just going to build an H1, which is not going to have anything right now. And then we'll have a button that's going to allow us to like increase the counter. Okay, so in the old days of Vue 3, or still, I mean, you can still do this. This is still totally like a thing. The way it would work is you would export default an object, and then you would put like a name of the new component. So we always call this the counter component. And then if you want to have like state, you would have to create a function called data. So we would just define a method called data, and then it would return our state. So we would return an object, and we'd have in our state we'd have a property called counter, which will start out at 0. Okay, and then after this data method, if we wanted to actually have like functions that we can use, then we have to actually have a separate object called methods, and then we would define functions in there. So in this case, I would want to have like an add1 method that all it does, and this object ends up existing in the context of the component instance. So there's like a class underneath all of this. So you do need to use the keyword like this. So this ends up becoming like this dot counter equals this dot counter plus 1. Okay, that's this dot counter. And then that would be it. So there I go. So now I have a component that has a state of counter and a function that adds 1 to that counter. And now I can interpolate the counter into the DOM like that. Essentially anything that's in this object that's returned by the data function becomes available to the thing. Let me refresh. Yep, see, there we go. So you see it says 0 now. And then the button, I can add the function, which you just do add click. And you would just say add click equals add1. Okay, now what doesn't it like about this? Oh, it's just, I still got to put it all in like one parent element like React. So I need to wrap this in a div. There we go. But you see now when I click this button, it's going to run this function add1, which changes this variable counter. And yeah, you have a counter. So this is sort of like the classic way of using Vue. And there's a lot more you can do in this object. Like you can do what's called computed properties, which are properties that are the result of a calculation, where the calculation gets run whenever a particular state changes. You can do like on mount, lifecycle methods, all sorts of stuff you can do in this object. But basically, bottom line is like everything that has to do all your components logic is exported into this object. That's still the case. The difference is that now what you do is instead of having this data method and this methods object inside of your object, you just have one method called setup. And this is just kind of like, if you think about like React, how like kind of like all your components are a function, and then before you render your JSX, you would do all your magical functional stuff. It's kind of the same idea here. So you're just basically wrapping everything in one function. The only difference is that it returns not just like state as in like your data variables, but also all your methods. So essentially what I want to do is now, if you're using, this is what's referred to, when you're using the setup method, it's called the composition API. And the reason why this is like sort of desirable versus the old way where you have like all your data in one place, all your methods in one place, is that you might have certain state and certain methods related to a piece of state, and now you can kind of define them in clumps if you want to have your code sort of more organized based on functionality, not based on sort of use case. So, which some people prefer one or the other. So they're just giving you more choices. Okay, so if I import out of view, I want to import now there's this ref function that's going to allow us to define our state when we have when we use the composition API. So from view, so we're going to pull that out. So now we need to recreate our counter state. So we're going to say const. Actually, yeah, that should still be fine. Const counter equals ref 0. So essentially what this does is that it creates an object. So the counter doesn't become the variable. There's the counter variable, which is actually going to be an object with a property called value, and this is going to be the initial value of value 0. Okay, so now whenever I use counter here, it's going to refer to the counter.value, but not quite yet. Because what's going to happen is that this setup function has to return anything I want to make available to my template. So I want to make counter available, so I'd have to return an object with counter in it. And see, now counter's back. Good. But then I'd also want to define my method. So I would create my method, add 1. And so now I'm defining it as a normal function, not as like a class method. Okay, add 1. And then what I can do is I would just do counter dot value, because that's the actual underlying value that I want to change. And I would say now this equals counter dot value plus 1. Same idea as this like weird twist where it's like dot value. And now I can then return add 1 in the return of this setup. And that's that. So now this is working again. Okay, so same end result, just slightly different way of getting there. So instead of having like different sections of the object, it's just basically the name of the component and the setup function that sets it up. And then I'm returning one object with all the methods and variables that I want to make available for my components template that I plan on using in the component template. Okay, that's pretty much how the composition API works. Of course, there's other things that you can import from Vue to do all the things you used to be able to do with sort of the object-based API. I think they called it the options API because you have different options. But, you know, things like lifecycle functions and whatnot. But the idea is basically you've shifted it from having like an object with a bunch of different properties, and you would put whatever belongs in what property, so a bunch of little baskets based on how I'm using these different things. Instead of you having one function where I can categorize it more like, hey, I have these methods and these variables that are used for like this particular functionality of this component. Whichever one you prefer would just be based on how your brain works in organizing data. I would say I do still like sort of the older style better. Though I can definitely see some benefit to this as you have like a lot more logic in your components, and just kind of having like, everything kind of scattered a little bit could be to a disadvantage. So it's nice to have everything kind of where you can bundle it more clearly through this setup method is fine. So that's cool. But yeah, that's sort of the ins and outs of Vue. I mean, then you can make more components. So I can go in here and make more components. Then I would just import the component, and I'd be able to use them in my template. Like you could use like a React component or a Svelte component or an Angular component. So that's just a quick reintroduction to Vue. Hopefully you guys have a great day. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.